Touch, taste, smell, hearing, and seeing. The five senses. We all learned about these at some point in elementary school. For some of you, that was a few years farther back than it was for me. We also learned how intricate and complex the body is, but on a very basic level. Last year, when I was taking a psychology class on campus at LBC, I learned just a little bit about the brain, and it completely fascinated me. I think, honestly, I enjoyed it a little bit more than other people, and potentially I'll enjoy it a little bit more than you guys might, but bear with me, please, because the body is a great testimony to how creative God is, and the brain is just a small part of that. Any information I'm sharing with you is going to come from the textbook that we used in that class, which was written by Freeman Shakara. So we're going to walk through neuroscience in the next few minutes. Big word, sounds awful, I know, I promise it's not. Neuroscience is the science that deals with the structure and function of neurons, nerves, and nervous tissue. So what's a neuron? A neuron is the basic cell that makes up the nervous system. The nervous system is a network of cells that sends information from one part of your body to another. Neurons are also considered to be the building blocks of the nervous system. A neuron consists of three parts: the dendrites, the soma, and the axon. The dendrites are these tiny little branch-like structures that are responsible for receiving messages. The soma, right here, is the cell body. It contains the nucleus, and it is responsible for maintaining cell life. And then we have the axon, which is this long tube-like structure that carries messages and information from one neuron to another. Nerves, then, are actually bundles of those axons that travel together through the body and within the peripheral nervous system. Now, I'm not going to explain anything about these, but within our bodies, we have a central nervous system, which includes our brain and our spinal cord, and we have a peripheral nervous system, which divides into the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system, which then further divides into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. Now getting to the actual brain. We have the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain, and the forebrain is where we're going to spend the rest of our time. In the very center, we have what's called a thalamus. The thalamus relays sensory information, so relating to our five senses, and it sends messages from our senses to higher parts of our brain, except it only deals with four senses: touch, taste, hearing, and seeing. Because our fifth sense, smelling, goes through our olfactory bulbs, which are these two little projections on the very front of our brain that receive information from the sensors in our nose, and that takes information then to the higher parts of our brain. After the thalamus, we have the hypothalamus, which is responsible for motivational behaviors such as sleeping, sex, hunger, and thirst. Then we move on to the hippocampus, which is round. It looks like a seahorse. And the job of the hippocampus is to form long-term memories. Finally, we have the amygdala, which is an almond shape and is actually Latin for almond. And the amygdala is responsible for the memory of our fears and for our fear responses. In a book written by K.E. Taylor called Brainwashing: The Science of Thought Control, we get to see an example of how monkeys who have damaged amygdalas from being experimented on actually respond differently to snakes than they should. Typically, where you'd think they'd be scared, they'd run away, they wouldn't want to have contact. They're acting friendly, they're approaching the snakes, they're letting the snakes approach them. And so I thought that was interesting just to see how tiny little differences like that can change us so much. All right, I'm done talking about the brain. I hope you all kept interest even if you don't remember those words that I used, because I only covered a small bit without really going into any depth at all. Yeah, think that one over. So I genuinely wanted you to see an example of how wonderfully awesome and how wonderfully creative our God is. And the placement of each little thing in our bodies and how they work perfectly together is not a coincidence. We have a designer We have been designed. We show evidence of design, and a God who did that for us and created everything to work so perfectly and so intricately and complex deserves to be adored, and he deserves to be worshipped.